Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, November 17th, 2016. Very interesting developments in Germany and also in Asia. In fact, I debated for about half an hour which story to tackle today and which one to leave for the coming week's blogs. But I think I'm going to tackle the stories coming out of Germany. Because I think this is worthy of some attention, some consideration. The first story I want to talk about appeared on Reuters about 3 days ago, November 14th, and that story is titled "Steinmeier to Swap German Foreign Ministry for the German Presidency." This is a story that was authored by Andreas Rinke and Andrea Schalal, and the dateline is in Berlin. The other story appeared on Election Day last week itself, on November 8th, 2016. Again, this is RT referencing a story in Reuters that was written by Nick Oxford. That story titled "Germany Must Detach Foreign Policy from the U.S. Whether Trump or Clinton Wins," and this according to a think tank. So I want to tackle these stories. I want to read a few paragraphs from each story and then give you my high-octane speculation as to what I think might be going on here. All right, so the first one we're going to tackle is the Reuters story by Andreas Rinke and Andrea Schalal, "Steinmeier to Swap German Foreign Ministry for the Presidency," datelined 3 days ago. Chancellor Angela Merkel's conservatives agreed on Monday to back Social Democrat Frank-Walter Steinmeier as Germany's next president, creating a vacancy at the foreign ministry at a critical moment in relations with Russia and the United States. And now I'm skipping, wow, pardon me, sinus problems again, folks. Skipping 3 paragraphs here. The Chancellor's desire to show a unified front gained new urgency after the election of Trump, at a time when anti-establishment parties are taking root across Europe and the anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany has made rapid gains. The next foreign minister will have an overflowing in tray as Germany tries to unite a divided post-Brexit European Union, contain an assertive Russia, and work out a new relationship with Washington under Trump. Media, and please note that line, work out a new relationship with Washington under Trump. Media reports tipped European Parliament President Martin Schulz as a candidate. Schulz has in recent weeks criticized Turkey over human rights and taken a firm line towards Britain over its pending departure from the European Union. Last week, he said he hoped for, quote, rational cooperation, unquote, from Trump, whom he had previously described as, quote, not only a problem for the EU, but for the whole world, unquote. Now, getting back to Steinmeier, just a couple more paragraphs here. Steinmeier, in his first interview after the news, said he worried about the rise of populist candidates in the United States and across Europe with their anti-immigrant and nationalist rhetoric, mistrust of the media, and isolationism. Quote, I see all those trends here at home too, unquote, he told a newspaper, pardon me, a website run by the Bild newspaper, quoting again, we have to pay close attention and my appeal is clear. We must nip it in the bud, unquote. All right. So that's the Reuters article. Now I want to turn to the article that appeared in Russia Today on Election Day in the United States last November 8th. This is an article that also, the original byline is from Reuters, written by Nick Oxford, all right? And the title of this article, Germany Must Detach Foreign Policy from the United States Whether Trump Wins or Not. Or whether Trump or Clinton wins, and this according to a think tank. Again, the dateline here by Nick Oxford. Now, I want to read the first 4 paragraphs of this article, and then I want to combine both articles together and give you my usual high-octane take on what I think all of this might possibly mean. Quote, a leading German think tank has urged the government to redirect its foreign policy toward gaining more independence from the United States, regardless of who becomes the next U.S. president. In October, the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, a Berlin-based government-oriented think tank, published a paper titled, quote, even without Trump, much will change, unquote. It calls for, listen carefully, it calls for a more aggressive German foreign policy, which should pursue its own economic and geopolitical goals independently from those of the United States, and if need be, even go against Washington's interests. Quote, the presidential elections in the U.S. can have serious consequences for the global order, unquote, said Johannes Timm, the author of the paper and head of the U.S. research group for the think tank. Quote, Germany, therefore, should re-examine both its relationships with the United States and its own contribution to the world order, unquote. Now, what do I think is going on here? Well, first of all, I want you to remember that Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the current German foreign minister that is now going to be elevated to the German presidency, in other words, become the head of state in Germany, recall that about 2 years ago, it was precisely Foreign Minister Steinmeier that gave that then controversial speech in a hotel in Berlin to a group of German businessmen, in which Steinmeier himself said two things. First of all, German foreign policy was going to have to become more, quote unquote, militaristic and aggressive on the world stage. Now, at the time, this was just him talking, but I want you to notice now that this is being echoed by a German think tank. So in other words, what I'm trying to communicate here is that this foreign policy change has been a long time in the working inside of the German deep state, as it were, all right? In other words, you're not seeing anything new here. You're seeing something that's been being thought about and talked about and planned for quite some time. Now, this involves a rethink, as both articles point out, and the key here, I think, that you have to understand is that this is also occurring at the same time now that Merkel appears to be trying to weed out her cabinet of people that have been going behind their back, Berlin's back, and trying to patch things up with the Russians. So in other words, she's, again, as the first article, as the Reuters article indicated, she's trying to present a unified front. But also recall, in the last 2 years, the German defense minister, Ursula von der Leyen, has come out and stated that Germany has to increase the size of its military 3 times over. In other words, they want to triple their military in the next few years. And all of this, again, also part of the preparation for creating a common European military, all right? Now, I want you also to recall that President-elect Trump, during his campaign, made a repeated point, picking up from Ron Paul, that the United States has to rethink its entire alliance system and that its allies must assume a greater share of the defense burden, particularly in Europe. And that means, of course, that the greatest share of the defense burden in Europe would fall on Germany. All right. So what do I think is going on here? My speculation, folks, is that Trump's election is now going to be used, although, as I've tried to point out, this change in German foreign policy, this new direction, has been being discussed and thought and talked about for at least the past 2 years. What I suspect this means then is that the Trump election gives the Germans now the opportunity, so to speak, to press forward and use that as more or less the rationale for policies that they've already decided they have to implement anyway. Because please note, the Russia Today article is citing a paper that was published in Germany by a German think tank that was advocating this regardless of whether or not Clinton or Trump wins. So now I suspect that what you're going to see, if indeed President-elect Trump goes forward with his idea of renegotiating America's alliances and the alliance system itself, I suspect that what you're going to see the Germans press for, if not get, is if the current structure of NATO is revised, you're going to see a much larger German role in the organization and a commensurately smaller American role if NATO is not scrapped altogether. But rest assured, either way, what we are now witnessing are indications that either way, Germany has some sort of, as we would expect any country to do, has some sort of plan or backup. Now, the other thing I want to mention here in this connection is that Germany, in my opinion, for quite some time, has been a de facto nuclear power, all right? I suspect that you're going to see, as part of this more militaristic foreign policy, this more aggressive and independent foreign policy, that you might expect to see either some sort of announcement making it official or public in Germany's case, or that you're going to see an announcement to the effect that Germany needs some sort of nuclear deterrent, possibly in connection with a European-wide military. After all, France is a nuclear power in its own right. So there's a lot going on here. I want you to watch Germany over the next few years. As I said, there's been an important story coming out of Asia as well during this previous week or so. With all of the hoopla with the American election, it's been very difficult to cover everything, but there's interesting development now taking place in Asia, and I hope to cover that in the coming blogs. Anyway, that's it for today's news and views, everybody. I'll see you all on the flip side. Bye-bye, and God bless.